subscribe and like the video. Yeah,
that
when he
the
says we're going
US
to take over the minerals, here's the other side of the story. When he says we're going to take over the minerals, I'm not super well versed on the Ukrainian mineral maps, okay? I'm not Pete Buttigieg, who was very well versed on Afghan mineral maps. Okay? I am not the Pete Buttigieg of Ukraine. But from what I understand, a lot of the natural a lot of the minerals that they're talking about is in territories that are either near or directly in areas that Russia has forcibly annexed and captured. So when he says like we're going to extract these minerals, we're going to take over those minerals, like I don't know what he means by that. Is he basically claiming that like they're going to do a joint cooperative extraction agreement, a joint cooperative extraction agreement with Russia? Is that what he means? I don't really get it. I don't really understand what he's saying.
Report to show that we have a negotiated peace signed by both sides, and that is a peace we will preserve.
No, it's all on the Ukrainian side of the river, but their existence is basically entirely theoretical.
Not for combat. These would be deployments
well, that's why I said like near territory that Russia has annexed. You can't extract minerals in that area. If there are a ton of minerals there, I don't think you can extract minerals safely without like Russia's go ahead if it's in striking distance. That's why I said it's either around the areas that Russia has forcibly annexed and occupied or directly in the areas that Russia has forcibly annexed and occupied, which means that if these hypothetical minerals that are worth trillions exist on Ukrainian soil, which again, I don't know, okay? Why Dick Carl Dent and not Stay? I don't know any of these names, chatters. I don't know why you think I'm like picking and choosing favorites in German politics. I just don't know. I'd be down to have that other guy on too.
Of the burden, their share of the burden. We have a strong alliance that we've built over the decades. We have our solidarity and we have deterrence capacities. What does it mean? Would it be dangerous? If there is an agreement signed by Ukraine and Russia, thanks to the efforts of President Trump, and if we provide the guarantees and Russia violates the agreement, then it would be in conflict with everyone who is engaged in the peace process. And that is a change. That was something we did not see in the past. That's not what we saw in 2014. So that is the real change that we're marking. We have this deterrence capacity on the American side. We have the capacity for engagement on the European side, and that's something we're going to continue working on together. It's not dangerous, but it's credible. It's less dangerous than things that could happen in the long term. And I think this is what we need to do to ensure security. And I say this very clearly. We're also talking about security for Europeans. I've been saying this for weeks now. If we do not guarantee the security of this territory within Europe, then how can we guarantee our own security for one and all? We live just 1,500 kilometers from Ukraine, and the Germans and Polish are even closer. So our collective security is important. We need to answer this call for Europeans to be more engaged, and Americans will be there still in solidarity. Europeans are working for their collective security, but I really think this was a turning point today in our discussions.
Emmanuel, thank you very much. Great job, and it's been wonderful being with you. Say hello to your beautiful wife, and we will see you again soon. We'll be speaking often. We'll get this thing worked out. We're going to get it done.
I guess he's not going with Candace Owens' method at all.
Yeah.
Claiming that Macron's beautiful wife is actually a man. That's the Candace Owens strategy. All right. So let's get to it. Why Trump's rare earth deal with Ukraine doesn't make sense. The TLDR of it, even though this is literally TLDR, is that a lot of the minerals that Donald Trump is talking about is either directly inside of illegally annexed Russian territory now, inside of Ukraine, or very close to it. So how is he going to do extractions with American companies? I guess that is, the only way to do that is by basically dealing with Russia directly and picking apart Ukraine and Ukrainian soil piece by piece with Russia.
Over the last few days, US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky have had a pretty public falling out, with Trump calling Zelensky a dictator and Zelensky accusing Trump of living in a Russian disinformation space. Until recently, it was widely assumed that this was a consequence of the meeting between American and Russian officials in Saudi Arabia earlier this week. But while that meeting obviously didn't help, in the last few days there has been some suggestion that quite a lot of Trump and Zelensky's falling out has actually been about a prospective mineral deal that would see the US get preferential access to Ukraine's mineral reserves. On Thursday, Axios claimed that the US and Ukraine fell out after Zelensky refused to sign the original deal. And a few hours later, Mike Waltz, America's national security advisor, publicly urged Volodymyr Zelensky to take, quote, a hard look at a proposed deal. So in this video, we're going to look at this proposed mineral deal, why it's proved so controversial, and what might happen next. Podcast app. First though, what mineral resources does Ukraine actually have? Well, according to Ukraine's own geological survey, Ukraine has large underground deposits of certain in-demand metals, including titanium, graphite, lithium and uranium, as well as a handful of rare earth reserves, with all these deposits generally occurring along the so-called Ukrainian Shield, a strip of land that
Russia isn't ideologically against the West. They're just bitter. They can't be in the club. That's all. They don't have a strong anti-imperialism conviction. No, I understand that. I agree with you. And I'm pretty sure Vladimir Putin very openly admitted that, where he said, we are capitalists. We're not a socialist nation. We're a capitalist nation. Hello, we are no longer the USSR. Why can't we be your Israel? That was a conversation that took place with Tucker Carlson when he went over there to be like, when he went over there to be like, look at the beautiful metro stations Stalin built, and also, look, Russians eat burger every day, and it's actually better than American burger, which was, I think, the highest stage of like pro-Russian propaganda that anyone can ever engage in, to claim that Russian burgers are better than American burgers. Like, I don't know how Tucker Carlson is still seen as a patriot after that one. Okay, I wouldn't say that, and everybody thinks I'm an anti-American radical. Regardless, they're only against the West in terms of Western values, woke hoss rage. Yeah, I think that it is pretty obvious that post-USSR, post-collapse of the USSR, like Russia would have loved the opportunity to be a part of the American periphery. They would have loved to be a Western-aligned, you are whatever is trending. Yeah, it's super trendy to be someone who's critical of American foreign policy. You get rewarded a lot for that sort of thing. Famously, it's great to be anti-Israel and pro-Palestinian. It's so trendy. It was so trendy that I've been doing it for 10 years now. No one ever has a answer for why I maintained these positions over the course of a decade. Cool. Leftism, super trendy. Hey, have you looked outside? There's a literal fascist coup going on in the current government. What the f do you mean leftism is pretty trendy? Anyway.
Runs along the right bank of the Dnipro River. However, these deposits have not undergone any significant exploration or development. For instance, Ukrainian officials claim some of the world's largest deposits of titanium, used for missiles, planes and ships, but only 10% of its proven reserves are being developed. So why haven't these reserves been developed? Well, it's at least in part because during the Soviet and much of the post-Soviet era, Ukraine didn't receive enough investment. Then in the 2010s, when Ukraine began drawing up plans for it, offering outside investors tax breaks and investment rights, including a major oil and gas privatization effort in 2013, these efforts were interrupted by Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014. Then in 2017, Ukraine launched a new energy strategy to accelerate the licensing of mineral extractions. But Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022 again got in the way. Anyway, Ukraine's unexplored mineral wealth has apparently drawn Trump's attention, and Ukraine and the US are now negotiating some sort of deal that would give American companies privileged access to these deposits. The New York Times actually reported that Ukraine actually refused to sign a mining deal with Biden, so they could use it as leverage over Trump, and originally it looked like this strategy had worked. Earlier this month, Trump seemed to imply that he'd be happy to continue supporting Ukraine in exchange.
I'm losing my mind at the foreign policy I'm losing my mind at the brilliant foreign policy administration, the last one, of course. Why are you so mad at life while being rich? Because other people are getting screwed over, and I care about it. I care about that sort of thing. The IMF literally called for these minerals to be privatized, which is part of why. Yeah, okay, listen. It was always the case. Okay, hold on. Western forces have always wanted to engage in privatization. Bro can't conceptualize empathy. Yeah. Okay. Let's continue.
For access to its mineral wealth.
Hold on. I'm getting
saying,
a bunch
quote,
of different
they're going
things
to
that I got to
secure
respond
what we're
to.
giving them with their rare earths and other things, and that he expected $500 billion worth of rare earth minerals. Trump's enthusiasm for rare earths specifically is probably related to his anxieties about China. Rare earths are used in a whole load of advanced technologies, but China currently accounts for about 60% of all rare earth mining and about 90% of rare earth processing. However, it seems like the deal collapsed on Wednesday last week, when Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent visited Kyiv to sign it off, apparently because Zelensky decided it was too one-sided to get through the Ukrainian parliament, and was disappointed that it wasn't accompanied by any US security guarantees. This would be consistent with a slightly astonishing report from The Telegraph earlier this week, who published parts of the original draft agreement. According to that draft agreement, the US would get 50% of recurring revenues received by Ukraine from extraction of resources, and 50% of the financial value of all new licenses issued to third parties until it had received $500 billion, way more than the $175 billion the US has so far spent on.
Just wait until the states had enough of it. Hopefully they come together. I wish. Okay? I wish for a resurgence of some kind of pan-European movement that will undermine American empire. I just don't think that it will ever happen. And I personally think that it will only happen in the opposite direction that you would want it to. Because if Europe, as we've seen in the German elections, which we're going to be talking about in a second, if Europe basically was like, no, we are maintaining neoliberalism, like America's sliding towards fascism, we're going to combat fascism by holding on to neoliberalism. We are going to be the neoliberal state, okay? That is a terrifying prospect for the future, and I think that's untenable overall. I think that is not, you will inevitably collapse to a fascist movement, and that movement will most likely align either with the growing American fascist movement or maybe even the Russian fascist state. So who knows? Who knows where they would go? But it wouldn't be in the opposite. It wouldn't be in the popular direction. It wouldn't be like a popular mobilization, a popular front to combat fascism. That inevitably goes back to neoliberalism. Inevitably goes back to the destabilization, and then that destabilization creates volatility. Volatility creates larger right-wing fascist movements. So this is just extortion of Ukraine's natural resources, making them give you half of all their money basically indefinitely in exchange for not selling them out, but also probably selling them out anyway. No, there is a tremendous amount of selling out that has taken place the entire step of the way, every step of the way. Okay? Whether it be holding off on weapons transfers initially, like the appropriate weapons that were necessary, whether it be dumping older weapons in general to Ukrainian forces, and then also, as evidenced by even the TLDR summarization of Biden's attempts, there was always an extraction deal on the table. Ukraine just said no to it. So it's not like, remember when I told you there is no difference between Biden and Trump in terms of foreign policy? Trump just says the quiet part out loud. Well, there are some differences in terms of like how much Trump is glazing Vladimir Putin. Absolutely. But if you think that there wasn't some sort of extraction deal on the table that America wanted, you'd be wrong. Clearly, they were also pushing for it, just not aggressively enough, right? Donald Trump, on the other hand, is like, no, we want all of your natural resources. We're going to take 50% of them. There's nothing you can do about it. What the fuck are you going to do about it? This is cope? I don't think this is cope. I think this is just the truth. It does not matter. American foreign policy is uniparty, and it only goes in one direction. Right wing.
On Ukraine. But this agreement wouldn't just cover metal reserves. It also covered oil and gas, ports, and, quote, other infrastructure.
I'm willing to bet that Trump has expanded on the previous administration's negotiations, though, if that makes sense. Like, that's why I say American foreign policy only goes in one direction. And when Republicans come in, they push it even further to the right. And then the Democrats don't actually claw back. Democrats don't actually claw back any of the rightward shift that the previous administration put in place. Look at the Abraham Accords under the Trump administration, for example. Look at the Iran denuclearization agreement that fell apart. And then the Democrats never actually picked it back up. As another example, annexation of the Golan Heights, or the recognition of annexed territory in the Golan Heights. Another example, moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Another example. Most of these are Israel related, obviously, including the Iran one. But the Biden administration didn't actually go back on any of that. Why didn't they go back on any of that? Because they're not, it's uniparty. Liberals like it when the Republicans basically push the needle. When they really get more aggressive in terms of foreign policy, seemingly, because they never claw it back. They never actually go back to a return to normalcy or decency. Here's another example of this. Barack Obama. Barack Obama came into office on an anti-Iraq war ticket. Okay? He says he's going to fix the housing market crash. He's going to fix the American economy, and he's going to basically go back on the Bush-era war on terror policies. Did he do that? No, he did a literal troop surge in Iraq. Okay? He never closed Gitmo. Gitmo is still in operation. Guantanamo Bay is still very much in operation. He greatly expanded on drone warfare, okay, including extrajudicious killings of American citizens. So yeah, that is another great example of how liberals, even if they promise certain things, actually end up not doing those things and continue escalating conflicts around the world. Obama, on the other hand, did do some interesting stuff, I will admit, in terms of the Iran denuclearization agreement and also starting the normalization process with Cuba. Those two things were absolutely glaringly obvious W's for Barack Obama. Donald Trump immediately came in and cast all of that aside. And guess who came after Donald Trump and didn't actually fix it? His name is Joseph Robinette Brandon. Okay? So there it is.
As agreed. The US would also get to decide who got those licenses and the terms of any future projects, with the draft also stating that, quote, the agreement shall be governed by New York law, without regard to conflict of laws principles, and that the government of Ukraine waives sovereign immunity with respect to its liability. In short, the US basically gets to control all of Ukraine's extractable mineral wealth and any infrastructure until the country has paid back roughly 3 times what the US has spent in aid, which is why the Telegraph describes it as, quote, the economic colonization of Ukraine in legal perpetuity. Perhaps more importantly, though, it's not clear Ukraine would ever be able to pay off $500 billion, for the simple reason that, while Ukraine has clearly done a great job in advertising its mineral wealth to Trump, there's a fair bit of uncertainty about how much mineral wealth Ukraine actually has. You hear massive numbers being bandied around at the moment. Trump claimed Ukraine had $500 billion in rare earths alone. The New York Times put Ukraine's total mineral wealth at $11.5 trillion, while the Washington Post put it at an astonishing $26 trillion. But to be totally honest, none of these numbers seem remotely plausible. While it's true that Ukraine has pretty substantial lithium and titanium reserves, neither of these metals are really that expensive. The price of lithium has fallen by more than 80% in the past 2 years, for instance. It's not even clear Ukraine is that well endowed when it comes to rare earths. While the Ukrainian Geological Survey claims some rare earth deposits in Ukraine, the US Geological Survey doesn't list Ukraine as having any reserves of the 15 key rare earth elements. In fact, the former director of the Ukraine Geological Survey said recently that there has been no modern assessment of rare earth reserves in Ukraine, and estimates were based on old Soviet-era studies. This speaks to a more general truth about rare earths. Contrary to what the name suggests,
So what happens if it's not there? So then Ukraine is just cooked for no reason? I mean, they're already cooked for no reason. Even if there are rare earth minerals there and they extract it, it's not like Ukraine is getting a piece of that. It is truly insane that America can so openly talk about basically stealing all of Ukraine's natural resources, or worse, talking to the invading force, the invading nation, about, doing a little split with Ukraine. That is America's foreign policy. Like they're talking to Russia and going, yeah, we're going to take some of this you can take as well. And, you know, what a great deal for us. Now, of course, it's not a first. Yes, you're right. It's not a first. This is American foreign policy. I'm just shocked at how out in the open it is, because Donald Trump, as always, is the great communicator.
Not actually that rare geologically. The issue is mainly that...
Does this undeniably make Russia an imperialist? Russia and its irredentist actions already Russia is a right-wing, ultra-nationalist, capitalist kleptocracy. They're not the USSR, okay? They're just straightforwardly trying to bring back, to the best of their ability, Russian Empire. I think it's truly crazy how much America has benefited from this. It really is. I mean, god damn, dude. And it is extra wild that Donald Trump is doing this out in the open. Like, no secrets at all. What is this? He's about to farm you? Who? Vladimir Poo? Asmongold is talking about you right now? Oh, nice. Another person who is going to have some fantastic political takes, I suspect.
Their extraction is severely polluting, and their value is massively overhyped. According to Bloomberg's Javier Blas, the value of all the world's rare earth production at best rounds to $15 billion a year, a fraction of the value of annual global oil or copper output. To reach the $500 billion mooted by Trump, the US would need to secure 150 plus years of Ukrainian output. So, if Ukraine doesn't really have trillions of dollars of mineral wealth, what's Zelensky doing talking it up? Well, some Ukrainian officials have come out to say that Zelensky talked up Ukraine's mineral riches to curry favour with Trump, but also in an attempt to draw American companies and capital into Ukraine, which would give Trump an incentive to take Ukraine's security more seriously. Whether this strategy works or ends up with Ukraine turning into an American economic colony remains uncertain. Either way, this all demonstrates a transactional attitude towards alliances under Trump, which doesn't bode well for Ukraine. As this whole rare earth saga demonstrates, following along with the news is pretty difficult in the current landscape. We're increasingly being flooded by misleading content, algorithmic feeds that just back up our biases, and reductions in fact-checking efforts. It almost feels like people are intentionally making it harder to get to the truth. One way you can cut through the noise is with Ground News, a website and app on a mission to give readers an easy, data-driven, objective way to read the news. Every day, Ground News ingests over 50,000 articles from all over the world. Every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, and ownership of the source's reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. For example, here's a story about JD Vance warning Zelensky against bad-mouthing Trump. Right away, you can see that the story had at least 33 outlets reporting on it. 31% lean left, while 50% lean right. Every story also comes with a detailed view of the bias distribution, factuality scores, and even specific ownership information, so you can see how reliable the reporting actually is. You can also swipe through some of the headlines to reveal that the left was more likely than the right to report Zelensky calling on Trump to be more truthful, and noting that Trump operates in a disinformation space. But my favourite part has to be their blind spot feed, which highlights stories that are being underreported on one side of the political spectrum or the other. This not only helps you redress your personal news bias by reading stories you might otherwise have missed, but also gives you a better perspective on how the media ecosystem is being manipulated.
Anyway, let me see where our German friends are at, and then we'll talk about, is she okay? Yeah, I've been... I don't know. She been pooping diarrhea since yesterday, and I wasn't here, so I don't know what my brother allowed her to eat, basically. But it'll be all right. All right, we are now going to talk about the German elections. Okay, and I have a German streamer who's also going to be talking to us about who's going to give us some direct info. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, this is the German. You wanted the German. Now there's a German one here.
What would you like for me to call you, by the way? Or how would you introduce yourself to my audience?
Just call me Carl. It's
okay.
fine.
All right, Carl. Hold on. Let me Boom. Let me turn this off.
So
All right.
do you want a German accent or not?
I
can give you the full German experience if you want to.
I mean, I like that you're making it seem, you're implying that you don't have a German accent right now.
I do, but I can make it much stronger.
Okay. No, this is good. This is a good level of German, I think.
It's an
Have you
acceptable
ever
level of
heard
German accent,
my
right?
German accent, Carl?
No, yeah, I did. I like your Turkish one better, but the German one is not bad.
Oh, when I say like, oh mein Gott, ich kann nicht glauben.
Kann das nicht fassen. Nee, you got to work on your anger level, because if you want to imitate a German one, then you got to be much more angry. This was more like an Austrian accent.
Ah, okay.
The German one is like a much harder one, like, oh mein Gott, ich kann das nicht glauben.
Oh mein Gott,
like
ich kann nicht glauben.
That's much better. More angry. Just imagine you hate foreigners, and there's a bunch of them in your country, and then that's the anger level you want to have.
I mean, that's not very hard to imagine how people behave in that situation, considering that I have been a long time warner, I guess, not an advocate, but I've been warning about the fascist movement and mobilization happening in Europe and European countries, Germany included, for quite a while. And I think that there is a lot that is happening in the United States of America that ends up happening in Germany as well. Now, of course, I want to talk to you about that today, considering that there was obviously a German election that took place, and Germany's conservatives celebrated the election as the far right was carved out of the governing coalition, even though they had major victories. And I want to talk about that.